You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Batuta Advocate on Desert Rock FM. Welcome back to the Batuta Advocate radio show. You're joined here today by myself, Clancy Overall, editor of the Batuta Advocate, and Errol Parker, editor at large. How are you, Errol?
Good, mate. Always good. How are you?
I'm going well. I'm excited about today's episode. It's a guest we've been chasing for quite a while. Elusive guest, a household name in Australia, as we'll get into in a bit. You're a big fan as well.
Yes, you know, when he was walking up the stairs into the studio, I thought it was the former Victorian Premier Jeff Kennett. But as it turns out, it was Greig Pickhaver.
The audience might know you as H.G. Nelson, but it's actually Greg.
Correct.
Never knew your real name till today. Even then at Secrets of Our City, I thought you were doing that the first season under H.G. Nelson. You know?
Well, it is a trick to be able to be two people. And I have to ask the director every so often, oh, look, watch out here. We might end up in a bit of trouble with H.G. looming when he shouldn't. But generally speaking, I try and discipline myself to make a mark. What people sometimes confuse is, though, that the sensibility of one is different to their expectation of what it's going to be. So I try and let other people tell the story. I don't want to interfere too much, whereas HG would interfere all the time and, try and respond to what they say. So I just let them try and tell it as boldly as I can.
This is in your new programs, but can we just start from the beginning with when you kind of first entered the public eye, you became a household name, you were in Alias, and so was your partner in the Roy and HG. What was the decision to go Alias in the early days of your career? Was that to protect future work in media?
Look, I don't know that we thought that through that much. Okay, this is going back a long time. We like the idea that sporting commentators were fictions of people's imagination in the way that people would think of Ray Rabbits Warren, a bloke called Rabbits, what could it be, and Warren and stuff like that, and the way he talks and so on, and imitating the way he talks. And, being able to do that. We always thought they were characters. And, of course, this is a bit lost now. It's not quite as clear that characters play the games of rugby league or AFL or anything. The great characters in the game now seem to be in things like tennis. So you have Kyrgios and Tomic, I see's back, which is great news. or Rafael Nadal or, figures like that. They're superstars. I think that's what we were trying to get to. And where we kind of noticed at the time, you don't notice this so much now, is that half the commentators were old players who would still be able to do it if only management had the sense to let them run on, to open the bowling, to actually be in the full forward, or be the hooker that they always knew they were. We always felt that they were itching to get back on. In the history of course, we didn't realise that this would become such a thing, pioneering work of the great Sam Newman, or in the AFL, or of course Rex Mossop, or people like that in the rugby league. We never realised that then you'd have shows like the Bow Champion, if I got the right person, making a show on Foxtel, sort of a post-Hooter show on Foxtel, and the hours that you have to fill and stuff like that, and the inexhaustible. Remember, it's a very simple game. The inexhaustible bolt-ons that you can get into this thing.
Well, when you guys first, when the two of you first kind of hit the screen, it probably was a perfect time. It was almost peak with these characters because we had, Fatty and Sterlo on the footy show, and then we had Roy and HG.
That's right. And remember, of course, they all had names like the Bear. He was in Maurice, and he used to be on Channel 9, or the Moose, who used to be on 10, and they used to
the Falcon.
The Falcon, that's right. And then, of
the
course,
Chief.
The Chief. And then we got lucky with the Parrot, of course. So we were able to add on things like that. But that's a good question. I mean, I don't think that we were we just thought that was fun. We just thought that was a silly idea. I always thought Nelson was a classic Australian name, and Johnny says that when he grew up, the cops, if a car went missing or somebody, knocked off a post box, they'd always go round to the Slavens. That was a family of great ill repute in the area. Of Lithgow. Yes.
So what was the transition like going from being on the radio to being on television? Like, did you have to go and do a short course at night or something? Or
No.
Just up the energy.
I'm not sure really what I'd say if people were listening to this and they thought, I'm on radio now, how do I get on television?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what it is. Remember, of course, as you guys are discovering, luck plays such an important part in all of this. Is you
does.
do things and
Yep.
do things, people don't notice, all of a sudden you get lucky, people notice. It's as I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know already, it's a thing where the entertainment industry is like a bus. It sometimes stops at the stop you're at, you clamber on, it moves on. Then sadly, of course, the bus stops and asks you to get off.
Yeah.
And so it's like that. The idea now, of course, is that social media has changed all this, but in the end, luck still plays an enormous part.
it does.
Do you remember a moment where, I think personally, the moment I remember was the Olympics, the dream. These guys are hitting their straps.
Yeah.
Do you remember, was there any particular moment for you?
I've got to be honest, is the show that was done before that, which was called Club Buggery, which was a show which not many people noticed was, from our point of view, an incredible show.
Yeah.
A parody of the sort of show that would have been at a leagues club
Yeah.
in the previous generation.
So you felt
which
the
was
wheels
just fantastic.
turning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably couldn't call a show that now, could
You
you?
couldn't, no, sadly, you couldn't, no.
The
I'd like to
mid-nineties
try.
were a hell of a time, weren't
That's
they?
right. A moment when you thought this is working. This is hard because often the great moments, like when immediately asked that, like the mascot bomb off in the Olympics, I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, right.
We created this Fatso, the fat-assed wombat, as a perfect Olympic mascot. But then when they came to film it, what they did was they did the right thing of use the technology and the commentators that were covering the Olympic diving events and apply it to a bomb off between the mascots. So as you had exactly the right tone, you had the intonation, you had the sort of the whole thing. But I didn't have anything to do with it. They dreamed it up. The director and the crew dreamed it up and filmed it.
It's great that the production kind of worked in your favour in that particular.
It did. And remember, I'm trying to think of a moment. If you said to me, okay, the first television I can remember, this is really hard to imagine. Nine's got a program called Today, which is still there, but it often used to have a program before it called Business Today.
Yeah.
And Business Today asked us to do something, and I sort of looked at the phone and thought, maybe, what do you want us to do? Now, that was something where once we'd done a few of those, I realised that you could apply the ideas that we had. I mean, the guy who ran that was a guy called Michael Pascoe. Anyway, he had the idea that you could apply what we did to sport to business.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, if you can do that and make it work, then you can almost go anywhere with this.
Yeah.
So it doesn't answer your question completely, but I thought that was the first television bit where you felt as though I'm not embarrassed by doing this.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like, with your new show you're doing now, which is Secrets of Our City, it's not particularly new. You're in season 2 now?
Second series.
Second series. And you are exploring a lot of different, household names, like a lot of Bondi and Fitzroy and Fremantle you've covered, and you've told a lot of stories that are quite interesting that people might not know that were so popular kind of at the time. But you grew up in a very interesting part of Australia, the Barossa Valley. Well, you were born there.
Well, hang on. I should correct this, that there's a lot of suggestions on Wikipedia about where HG might have come from, and whether I've bothered to correct these or not, I couldn't care less, honestly. So the Barossa Valley is where HG comes from.
Oh, right.
Greig comes from a completely different part. It is an interesting part of Australia, though, the Barossa Valley, and it would make a good subject.
So I was going to ask, are you Dutch or German background? Do you speak
no,
Barossa Dutch?
The surname's a bit hard to find an origin for it.
Yeah.
The Greig is, because of the unusual spelling, is
Greig with an I.
is a surname in the family that is dragged back as a Christian name.
Yeah.
The surname being on the maternal side, so that gets lost in the history of naming.
Yeah.
And so it's a sort of a ridiculous idea, really.
Yeah, right.
And when we were kids, we used to go to the Barossa a lot for holidays. And I found it just a weird world. The names of places, the food they ate,
pubs.
the bratwurst, the whole thing of it was just weird.
Yeah.
Vines, lavender, it was just a very unusual part, even though it's obviously very close to Adelaide.
But you were a free settler. You were
Free settler.
you were a South Australian.
Yeah, what a beautiful way of putting it. Remember, of course, Adelaide was set up as a business.
Yeah,
It was.
You know, it's a completely different idea of how to establish
Cloudy
a town.
beer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And hip hop.
Oh, yeah, the Hilltop Woods, yeah. Keeping a flame a flickering.
So you were South Australian, Adelaide.
Yeah. The thing that happened was we lived in a part which was probably housing commission, but they were separate houses. They'd probably build that still, but
You weren't in the flats. You were in.
No, that's right, in flat on the ground.
Yeah.
But then my parents got lucky and bought a block of land which was on the edge of the city. I mean, it's not the edge of the city now, but this was growing up. So it was surrounded by vines, and they had some idea of a sort of hobby farm idea on the edge of the city. And then, as luck would have it, this became valuable to the expansion of the fossil fuel industry.
Oh, yeah.
And so they were able to sell the land or a petrol station and a hotel.
Yeah, right.
And that fueled a certain change in our fortunes, or the family's fortunes.
So you were kind of an outskirts family.
And outskirts, and pissed off that me family decided to move from that part, which was all bikes and jumping off the jetty and all that sort of stuff at Brighton, to the other side of town, which had none of that.
Yeah.
And in fact, there were kids that we knew in the patch and all that sort of stuff. When we went to the other side of town, it was really hard to find people who you knew in the area. It was a bit disappointing.
Well, Prospect is the home.
Prospect.
It is the home of the R.M. Williams boot.
It is the home of the R.M. Williams boot. You know you're Adelaide.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
It's on the tag of every shoe.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
There we go. 5 Percy Street Prospect.
5 Percy Street Prospect. That's right.
Now you spent a bit of time working as a roadie.
Yeah. Okay.
Or is this HG? Or is this?
No, this would be Greig. HG couldn't get that sort of employment. What happens here is that I've got no musical skill at all, but I was always kind of able to, from a background of building sets, might have been the first job I got in the theatre, to thinking, well, I can put this together, this plugs in here and so on, to being able to understand certain things about how bands operated. I spent a lot of time doing that, and because there was a certain restlessness in everybody at that age of their life, we were able to kind of get jobs. And this has got to do with Adelaide being a place where bands came to.
Yeah.
So they're always looking for help,
Yeah.
meaning that the main roadie had come and you're the assistant roadie.
A lot of the great roadies came from Adelaide. We've actually met a couple, especially with that kind of 10-pound pommy or a rock music.
Ah, well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth the Octagon, although it gets very confused because big bands like old bands like the Masters Apprentices, they're Glenelg based, but there's tons of bands that come from Adelaide, kind of get going and then move on.
Yeah, and they take the local lads with them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right.
So you didn't get taken with Billy Thorpe?
No, the other way round. Billy Thorpe came and I got to work with him there.
Yeah, right.
It didn't mean that I didn't work with other bands, and in fact that became quite a thing early on, so I could understand how to make concerts, and we did a lot of work with Triple R in the early days and so on, with live concerts, live events.
So John Doyle, Roy.
Yes, sir.
He's a South Australian as well?
Oh no.
Christ, no.
Yeah, no, Christ, no.
Not with
He's
that accent.
Lithgow and Newcastle.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah,
Two beautiful towns, especially when he was a kid.
Well, rugby league.
Yeah.
He has that Coal Town twang, doesn't he?
He does, doesn't he? Yeah.
Him and Laurie Oakes.
Yes, that's right. No, he grew up in Lithgow and very proudly Lithgow, and then I think went to uni at Newcastle, which is a very common thing in those days.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where that pattern goes.
He actually might have been there before the prisons, which would have been a very different town back when. Who was the Flash? Came out of there.
The Lithgow Flash, Marjorie Jackson.
Marjorie Jackson.
Yeah. Well, that's three.
For instance, he says at school holidays he worked in the armaments factory, which I'm not sure what the history of that is, but he would go down and make bullets.
If you put your windows down driving over the Blue Mountains, you get down past Lithgow. If you smell carefully, you can smell the Weet-Bix factory, and as you leave town, you can smell the Tic Tac factory.
Wow,
and it smells exactly what you imagine it smells like, just burning Tic Tacs.
Wow, isn't that great?
Yeah.
Now, the latter one I wouldn't have known, but the other one, the smell of the brewery, always reminds me of Weet-Bix soaking in piss. Yeah. So sort of particularly pungent tone to it, note to it.
So you obviously had to do a bit of learning as a full-blown South Australian, because for a lot of Queenslanders, you exist in the mind of those Origin kind of rebel pirate commentaries you do of Origin, where you came up with some of the greats, you know, petrol, 70 cents a litre, brick with eyes, all that stuff. You had to learn a whole game, which a lot of people from down south don't do, unless they have a gambling problem. They don't learn another football code.
That's right. Okay. Well, the thing here is that I taught Roy about AFL and he taught me about rugby league. And it is hard to learn a game as an adult because rules never make any sense.
Yeah.
Why is it 6 tackles? Why is a forward pass disallowed? That was a forward pass. Why don't they? Etc.
The scoring in tennis.
Yeah, scoring in tennis. Yes, there you go. There you go. You can only learn them as a kid. Yeah. So what happened was that I had interest. I was lucky enough to kind of hit the league when I think the Eels were a very dominant side. Yep. So they win their first flag and all that sort of stuff. And they had Sterlo and all those, the Zip man, etc., the guru and so on. And so this was a very easy transition to make because of the things we were talking about earlier, that somehow you'd created this team of characters, larger than life characters.
Oh, Jack Gibson with the fur coat.
That's right. Yeah, Ding Dong, the witch is dead. You know,
he looked like one of those guys sitting front row at an Ali fight with the mink.
Indeed. I mean, I didn't have much. No, I don't. It's true. And remember, of course, the world around it was so things like the Taj Mahal and the game at Cogra and then everybody going over to the Taj Mahal and stuff like that, or the Penrith Panthers story or stuff like this. Yeah. I mean, all of that seemed to me sort of rich as an outsider, too rich to ignore. Yeah. In terms of humour, in the same way as, you know, sort of rural Australia now is writ large as a great exploit.
Do you think it's as easy to find humour in AFL? Obviously, you know, with the NRL, it's a never-ending show.
Yeah.
A lot of scrappers that come through and make good.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
It kind of seems like, you know, from the perspective of a Queenslander, that there is some type of decorum that there is in AFL that doesn't really exist in rugby league.
I think it's title. I think that one of the problems for the AFL at the moment is it's going through a stage where the game is so sanitised that and governance is the only thing of interest. So is concussion or you know, transferring from one team to another team, free agency. You know, the Essendon saga really buggered it up with
the father-son rule too.
Yeah. The father-son rule, So it's that's right.
Very
so
weird.
You have all these things that are kind of, I noticed they're going to play a game for the fire people, you know, they're raising money for the fire. But I'm not sure where we're up to with this. But anyway,
all the fires are out.
Yeah, all the fires are out. That's right. That's what they call the game. Yeah. Anyway, wait until a player gets injured, a key player gets injured. The howling will be enormous, you know, in these sort of things. Where I think it is sort of, it's got itself into a funny relationship to society as a whole, where people somehow seem to think that the way that the AFL behaves is the way the whole of Australia should behave.
Yeah, no.
And last year they got into terrible trouble. You may remember a couple of matches where they were overzealous in policing the crowd, so much so they had people on the boundary, one of whom stepped in and appeared to want to separate a couple of players. And I thought, whoa, this is just way too far.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is, the NRL throws caution to the wind in a lot of regards.
It does.
I mean,
it does.
On the weekend at the Nines, I was just reading that St George lost their 3 marquee players to injuries in a pre-season Nines exhibition.
Yeah. So they do throw caution to the wind, and I've got to say is that there's something about the league where, you know, I mean, the Matthew Lodge story. I mean, will we ever have somebody able to write it? That's the problem now. The story of a lad who went to New York and realised that no one knew about rugby league, and he would show them all about rugby league by obviously kidnapping people in an apartment and saying, you know, I want to marry you and all this sort of stuff, and then come back and then, as luck would have it, found himself in the Broncos, who rehabilitated in the redemption story writ large, and he decided to pay out of his own money the civil damages that were awarded to the family he took hostage. And now, of course, he was then going to be part of the leadership group, even more redemption. And now he's done something. I want to say
ACL.
Yeah, ACL.
He is out. ACL he's going to spend more time off the field because of an ACL than the aforementioned kidnapping in New York City under Donald Trump.
Right.
Yeah. Unfortunate hand.
See, the rugby league does more redemption work than the Catholic Church.
Yeah, definitely. And also a lot of marketing. It is marketing.
Well, that's the thing.
Our friends on Hello Sport, they call it marketing. In the AFL, they call it a scandal. In fact, it probably doesn't even make it to the newspapers because they've got a very good rug in the AFL.
This is an interesting question. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to get out of it. I mean, the players who would normally come up through the ranks and be thought about as draft prospects to continue the tradition of Favola or Plugger Lockett, they just don't get a game.
Well, Dusty's the closest thing, but he's a rugby league product as well.
He is.
He could easily be a player who could swap from AFL into rugby league quite effortlessly. I would imagine.
Culturally, just
very close,
seamlessly.
Very close, yeah. Very close. The idea he left his car in the MCG car park for months afterwards.
He caught a flight the next day. His car.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I just also like the idea that. That they let it stay there.
Exactly. I think probably you'd find in the AFL there's a lot of stories that aren't making it into the news because the AFL news is very sanitised. And remember, of course, we have more people covering AFL than we do playing the game.
Yeah.
So the stories are spread very thin.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in Melbourne these days, aren't there?
That's right. Well, and remember, of course, the great thing is if you want an AFL story, Adelaide's the place to go because the stupid rivalry between Port, Power and the Crows.
Even more so than the West?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. It'd be a near-run thing.
Adelaide's a smaller population to saturate a town with two AFL teams.
Yeah, and remember you've got idiots running around in the media like Corns who has to draw attention to himself by saying the most ridiculous things. And that's where it's gone now. It's gone into that level again rather than being on field. Yeah.
The outrage should stay in the stands, really.
That's right.
And basically be focused on umpires.
Yeah, I know. And it's an interesting problem. I mean, I do think a lot about it, why the AFL finds it extremely difficult to do anything that's sort of right. So I was just explaining to you offside about the thing about the 7 and the desire to kick more goals, and so they changed the rules. They made a foolish mistake, in my view, in asking a member of each team to come into the goal square at the bounce. They should have just asked the defender to go in the goal square because this would give you a roving forward or attacker to try and get the ball and kick more goals. But they had the lowest score since 1952.
And the advertisers didn't get their
indeed,
minutes.
they were crying. Well, the reverse, not all the way to the bank, but wherever they cry when they're not going to the bank.
To the AGM.
Yeah.
And the show this week, which certainly is a big one, is presented to you by Stan's brand new season of Better Call Saul.
That's right. Saul, the dodgy lawyer who was the star of the Breaking Bad prequel, certainly would have excelled if he was around during the Sir Joe era, wouldn't he, Clarence?
Yes, I think he would have, Errol, because he gets things done, unlike most legal eagles, and Sir Joe got things done as well. And in fact, the way Saul Goodman gets things done makes for very good entertainment.
Yep. The brand new season of Better Call Saul has officially kicked off with new episodes dropping the same day as the US. And that's only on Stan, so sign up today for your 30-day free trial and rip in.
Makes for great entertainment. Now, you have covered the culture of sport, all codes, the Olympics, which was a great little glow-up for Australian media. To have all these international athletes in Australia, a lot of them were watching you late at night.
Yeah.
Now you are turning your craft to something a bit different, which is enclaves of Australia, as opposed to institutions and football and sport. You're now focusing on suburbs and towns. This is in a program, as we said, Series 2, which is The Secrets of Our City. I actually tuned in the first series, and I was actually blown away by what I learned about Bondi Beach. Who could have known all those stories about Dragon and those bands that kind of redirected the sewage through a rock concert
and all the heroin.
All the heroin.
That's right. Well, that's writ large.
All the Kiwis.
That's
and then
the Bondi that I remember.
Yeah, it's just like the Les Norton Bondi. You've got, on one end of the beach, you've got Russian Jews, and the other end of the beach, you've got Maori New Zealanders. And is that always been an interest for you, just scraping the surface on what people view?
Look, okay, it is. I mean, I'm endlessly fascinated. I mean, honestly, I'm way more interested in finding out about you here at the moment than telling you what I've done. You're talking about what I've done.
Yeah.
And when you look at it, I'm 5,000 times more interested in that. Partly because I know what I've done, so and sort of don't feel as though I have to tell anybody about it because that's me.
Yeah.
I'm interested in you and how you got to do this. My own advice would be, in terms of these things, is apart from treating it like a bus trip, is to try and be a moving target. Mm-hmm. So the thing is that because I don't just do one thing. I can't willingly suspend disbelief enough to call rugby league all the time.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is I don't want to get tagged too much with this thing because the only thing is that that'll go out of fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll not be there in a couple of years' time.
So you're kind of looking for a golden thread between all these
well
things.
done.
Yeah,
Perfect. So what I'm always doing is trying to look for the next thing.
Yeah.
But this is the really good thing for me to work on because it allows me to be the gatekeeper to your story.
Yeah.
Or your story.
Yeah.
It's not to do with me interposing,
Yeah.
thinking, oh, well, you made a mistake here. Why didn't you do that? It's to hear the drama of your life, the drama of, your experience and the changes the experience that you had, how it affected you. That's writ large.
And that's what interests you.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. One of the great things of the tempo of the times is people don't seem to want to learn from experience.
Yeah.
They don't want to know that the whale cops it in Moby Dick anymore.
Yeah.
they just don't want to know.
Yeah. Well, tell us some of the things you learnt listening to these people around Australia. Kind of Kalgoorlie, Fitzroy.
Okay.
So what surprised you the most? What was the biggest revelation?
Okay, one thing that I was always down on Malcolm Fraser, because I always thought he was a very conservative figure, and I was stating the bloody
Razor
obvious.
Fraser.
Yeah, that's right. Vote Mal, pal, that sort of stuff. Anyway,
I heard that one. Not even Shorten could have come up with that one.
In Footscray, there's this huge mural which is in the show to him because of the Vietnamese community.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I've got to talk about this, and I don't feel that comfortable about talking Malcolm Fraser. But then you hear the stories and what he actually allowed. I mean, remember Tempo of the Times stuff. I mean, it's never going to be Peter Dutton. He's never going to, I'm honest telling you now, he's never going to get the treatment in a show that Malcolm Fraser gets.
Yeah.
Then still in that area, the Alice Pung, the writer, she's a writer. Her dad is Cambodian, and he walks out of Cambodia into Vietnam to escape the Khmer Rouge. This is in the 70s. Then discovers he can't be a refugee in Vietnam, so he walks out of Vietnam back into Cambodia and walks south into Thailand, where he's able to become, which is a hell of a long way. I mean, this is a person of serious dedication. I couldn't do any of this. And walks into Thailand and becomes a refugee to Australia and stays in the Midway hostel in Footscray. And I said, and how did you begin work? And he said, well, the first day I was there, somebody offered to take me to work. Oh, no, they got a job. That's right. He got a job and found his way to work. And it was making trailers, like box trailers. And he said within a day, the other people at work said, and where do you live? And they said, well, I stay in the Midway hostel. Oh, we'll give you a lift.
Yeah.
This is out to Dandenong. And you think, wow, what an amazing
Before
place.
people pulling the ladder up.
Yeah, that's right. Correct.
Yeah.
It was a remarkable place.
Yeah.
Or it
helps when you're a good Catholic.
Well, separate issue, yeah. So what happens then? The next thing that happens was,
it's all the same.
Well, remember redemption. They can play rugby league. The other thing was things like the guy Cavallaro and Son comes from the islands north of Sicily, and the granddad. I'm not sure what brought the granddad to Australia. There was quite a lot of Italian immigration before the Second World War.
Yeah.
At the time of the Second World War, all the Italians were interred. You probably know all of this. And then as soon as treated very badly, assets seized, finances seized, forced labour. And then as soon as they get out and return home, the first thing they see on the film at the newsreel was Arthur Corwell saying, and I'm off to Italy to get a whole heap more of migrants who are going to make this country great.
Yeah.
And they look, well, hang on a minute, we've been here all this time, etc. like this. It was ever thus.
And it's particularly a lot of those up north, a lot of those Italians were kind of brought in for a little loophole post-White Australia policy where they didn't have to pay them as much. So they were indentured and then interned. And I think there is a rather strong anti-cop sentiment in some of these towns to this day because...
Oh, okay.
Okay. And there were also lots of Italians who came in because they were prisoners of war.
But where after the Second World War?
No, during the Second World War.
Okay.
And they were brought back here.
Yeah.
Jesus, that doesn't sound too ethical.
It's a very, the worst of those are, of course, the blackbirding episodes of the, in the northern part of Queensland.
So, yeah, you were saying before you did the Gold Coast, which is great that someone's doing this because as far as anyone outside of the Gold Coast would tell you, and living there now, it's a very transient population. Gold Coast is just real estate agents and white shoes and all of that. But there was this a whole lot of different waves and cultural kind of demographics, and even sometimes people didn't even surf there for a long time.
That's true. In fact, it's the surfer's paradise part comes from rough water swimming, not surfing as we understand it.
Yeah.
And Bob McTavish, I think, is the person who pioneered a lot of it in the southern part. And so that Superbank that's there at the moment, and Coolangatta and places like that, the southern part of it, that's within living memory being surfed.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not as a teenager, obviously, but within the current wave of surfers who are surfing, that's still something that's just developed relatively recently.
Back to that blackbirding, as you were mentioning, you said there was a lot of South Sea Islander bands getting around the Gold Coast.
Yes.
Is that in the same kind of regard? Is it the same kind of people? Or was that...
No, I don't think... I think they're completely separate.
Yeah.
Remember, of course, is that, and I'll never get the numbers right, the blackbirding starts about 1880, I think, just as slavery's winding down in America. So people are shanghaied off islands and brought in as indentured labour and sold to plantations.
Yeah.
And then the White Australia policy kicks in the 1920s or, in the 1900s. And all these people who have come as forced labour are then sent willy-nilly back to islands in the Pacific. And of course, if you were Samoan and turned up in Tonga, you were dead.
Yeah.
And so they had no regard to where the powers in Queensland in particular had no regard to where these people went.
Just an island's an island to them.
Thanks very much. An island's an island, and a person who looks Tongan is equally Cook Islander, etc. So there's that. I don't know if you mentioned this rather sad cemetery there on the near. I'll never get it. It's certainly been taken over by a golf course, and so it's been moved. The cemetery that acknowledged all of this was ploughed under by a golf course by the council and have to move down the road where it's...
Is this on the Gold Coast?
On the Gold Coast,
right.
Yeah. Hidden behind a series of... near a roundabout. My streets on the Gold Coast, very vague.
Yeah.
Hang on, I might be in northern New South Wales now.
Yeah, well, they're working pretty hard to protect the wall that was built in the Tweed by the South Sea Islanders.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think this is the cemetery, maybe in the Gold Coast, maybe in a golf course, just south of the Tweed.
Yeah. Right. So,
but that's very bad of me.
Chindera.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, Chindera Cemetery.
Yeah.
The Maori influence. Everyone's always made jokes about the Kiwis living on the Gold Coast, but the way they talk about it is modern times, holidays, young blokes coming over like they used to do to Bondi or Maroubra, young blokes coming over for a good time, find a bit of work in construction, maybe play a bit of footy. But you found that it was much longer ago that this was happening in the Gold Coast.
Yeah, this is something where, I've not considered, immigration because of entertainment. Yeah. But of course that's writ large, in the modern era, you've probably got, the bleeding obvious, things like Crowded House and so on. Or
Dylan Napa's Old Man, all those
right,
old
all that sort of
places.
stuff. And that's...
Russell Crowe as well.
Yeah.
Russell Crowe.
He came here to entertain.
That's right. They were talking about the other day, Firefight, and they said Russell Crowe's going to be on. I thought, you beauty 30-odd-footed grunt, you're going to be back, and stuff like this. But sadly, it was just a video message from Russell.
Like the Oscars.
Or coming out with an acoustic guitar singing something. So the history of Maori entertainment into Australia is obviously a tried and true thing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of odd things, like, as I understand it, I think it was 2SM, like out of Sydney, could be heard in New Zealand at night. That's hard to imagine that they had so much grunt that they could get to New Zealand.
Really?
Yeah, no,
so you could hear...
On the AM.
On the AM, not FM. Yeah, that's right, on AM.
But they would send that across... Whoa.
No,
I don't think they deliberately did it. That was just a thing that you could...
Yeah, well, see, at night, I think AM travels a lot further because it doesn't have to compete with the solar radiation or something.
Yeah, right.
In the
so
daytime.
They could hear SM.
Yeah.
And remember, SM was the big rock station, say then. Now
it's John Laws.
That's right. Now,
John Law's retirement plan.
Yeah, that's right. And you've never been trucked like this before. Yes, that's right. That classic album. Now, before that though, I'm not sure exactly how this happened, but the idea was that the Gold Coast was party central.
Yeah.
So they had these. It was a place where you could get off the hook.
Yeah.
So they had lots of things to do, like with the rise of the bikini or the
Yeah.
rise of, as you're pointing out, coming down and getting wrecked.
Yeah.
So they had to entertain, and I'm pretty sure the local council both turned a blind eye, but realised if you started measuring the height of bikini bottoms, that people would automatically think, well, bugger it, we'll wear less than what they want, stuff like that. So it had that
Meter maids.
Meter maids.
So this is under Sir Joe, that era, kind of.
Oh, yeah, well, right back then.
Queensland's puberty.
And then, remember, of course, there was those weird things that I seem to remember from as a child of people being sprayed with mutton fat.
Yeah.
From the birds,
Yeah,
beach inspectors.
Sunscreen that they used
Sunscreen of the era.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So
the mayor of the Gold Coast used to wear a bolo tie. Like, it was real Wild West.
It was very funny. And these pyjama parties seem to be the origin of it. And I'm not sure exactly.
Pajama party.
I know, it's a weird form of entertainment that people would go home, put their pyjamas on and then go out. But that was what you did on the Gold Coast. When in Rome, put the pyjamas on. So there was this rather louche, for want of a better way of a word that I'm not even sure what it means.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Jupiter's Casino.
In the modern era. But they had that string of hotels, rather large hotels, which did cater for family holidays.
Yeah.
But the kids were in bed, mum and dad could go out in the pyjamas. And then out of that, they had to actually
Throw the
have
keys
something.
in the bowl.
That's right. Which then somehow drew people to the hotels. So one hotel, and I'm going to struggle here. There was the famous Surfers Paradise Hotel, and then there were about
The island.
Yeah, there might have been up to 10 key hotels. As is often the way, put on a variation of what was there in the first place, which obviously was some variation on a Maori show band.
Yeah.
And then they all seemed to occupy this weird space where, they all did the same thing. They all, a mixture of rock and Maori songs and South Sea Islanders and language and culture and I assume, grass skirts swaying and things like this, as well as close harmonies and stuff like this. And so, and then they all roamed around and were able to. It's hard to imagine they all could play bass guitar as well as the saxophone. And
interchangeable,
completely interchangeable.
And so every pub had one of them going on.
They did. And occasionally, like there were old entertainers who somehow made it out of that. A famous one is Ricky May. Now, he's long gone, but he was my only contact with it at all, was Ricky May seemed to be able to do all of this.
Yeah.
And I can't remember them touring, even though obviously people who are listening to this might remember, they came down into New South Wales or maybe even to Sydney to some of because as you were pointing out, there were way earlier generations of New Zealanders here, and the numbers boomed. Might have been, I think there's in the show, it was something like 600 in a certain time, but then a few years later it's into the thousands.
Well, the Hunters and all those different bands. I mean, they brought music with them. That was
that's right.
Clear,
that's right.
Yeah.
And like the Hunter, Mark and
Todd.
Todd, good on you, Mark and Todd. They grew up in a family that was, I think, one of the
Fijian,
yeah, that's right. The mum or the dad was Fijian, and so they'd sing around, and they learned all this stuff as children, and so there was never any. They just inhaled it. Really,
The and
skill.
Then moved down to Bondi and really ripped in.
Yeah, even in Bondi though, by the time they come to Bondi, there's a much sort of harder edge to it. I mean, I think it's. Back to the smack. There was just a much
back to the
more.
smack.
Much more.
Yeah.
A tempo of the times.
Yeah, getting named in the Royal Commissions, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Well, remember, of course, this was a time up there where people were beginning to seek it out as a holiday destination.
Yeah. And all those bands, as you pointed out in your Bondi episode, were integral in getting the sewage redirected because it was the beach was covered in shit. That was
exactly.
another.
Now, the thing was about that, they thought that they'd have maybe 100 people turn up. The fact they got 250,000.
They said there was 250,000 people on the bit for a music concert.
Jumping Jesus.
Yeah, and it was such
Rose
a weird
Tattoo, that era. There was a lot of those.
That's right. That sort of very a very uncompromising music. I mean, it's hard to kind of remember that the bands could actually pull that sort of crowd.
What? Yeah. And that whole thing was just for the...
They tried to... What they did was they had a sewage outfall. It's got to do with the history of sewage in the city, which is itself an interesting thing. And they would... I mean, I can clearly remember going and swimming there and thinking, God, the first thing I've got to do is have a shower.
Well, that's what they used to... The Bondi Cigar. That was the turd floating.
That's right. In fact, there was a band called the Bondi Cigars. I think they were a blues-based band. And they were around for a long while. And it was a place where it's... Okay, after the Second World War, you could buy because of the Japanese attacks on Sydney, you could buy a house there for £100. Everybody had fled to the Blue Mountains.
Yeah.
And so...
And that's actually why the Jewish community took such a big hold of the area, because they said, this has got nothing on Europe right now, a couple submarines.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And also, then you had that...
I kind of wish they'd come back. You know?
Go buy a waterfront.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Go down to Vaucluse, pick up a house for £100.
Now, a quick story here is to do with how the rise and fall of the suburb, they allowed high-rise to be built, especially up on what I call the Dover Heights end. High-rise to be built up there, which then fell into disrepair and became cheap housing. And this was reflected even down on Campbell Parade, so much so that within in my living memory, it wasn't a sought-after address, Bondi, in the way it is now. When we made the Bondi episode, we got taken around by a real estate guy, and he said, if you're not a CFO or a CEO, I can't talk to you because I can't see your property. So the whole thing has changed from something where my partner's younger sisters used to live there, but they were almost they would consider they were slumming it. And the whole pattern was to move there and then drift down the coast. So you build up a bit of money there and drift it down towards Maroubra.
Yeah, right. And then eventually, nowadays, they've been costed out further south.
Oh, I know, Malabar and even beyond that now. It's changed dramatically.
Eden.
Well, they skip Cronulla, go straight down to the Gong.
Move straight in.
Sometimes they drip down to Long Bay.
That's right. That's right.
Now, what else are you getting up to? Do you do you doing stage?
Well, we're just sort of Rust Never Sleeps, but... what's happened is we've just finished a rather abruptly a stint with Macquarie Sports Radio. And they've gone through a big management change, and we got fired once and then rehired. Now we've been fired again from that. So we're not working for Sport Radio anymore, and we're not sure exactly what's going to happen today. We're kind of hopeful that somehow, you know how all the platforms are fishing for television content. So Twitter, Instagram, and so on are all nosing around television content, what I'm calling television content. So we're thinking that maybe there might be an opportunity, especially say with the Tokyo Olympics, to come in and do something with that.
Well, let's put the word out now, Greg, because we know these execs are listening to the Batuta Advocate podcast. We have two ready, willing, and able with runs on the board. So give them a call.
The difficulty is the same for you guys, is that you don't really want to... Well, there's nothing to tell, really, because there's a lot of moving bits and there's many a slip between cup and lip in what we do.
Yeah. The format exists. You're still Roy and HG?
Oh, yeah. We're still more than happy to work as Roy and HG, and still the enjoyment still remains the same. I want to find out about what Roy's thinking about this, the rugby league season just getting underway, the nines or whatever it is, and I find out exactly the same time as you. So I don't want to know beforehand. I want to ask him, and has Matthew Lodge got a future in rugby league, or is it the end for the plucky?
He could be a Pathways ambassador.
Grassroots
liaison officer.
Yeah, that's right. Pathways ambassador. That's right.
Errol and I, back end of 2018, did a national tour as the Batuta Advocate editors, and got to meet a lot of the dribblers that kind of read us religiously around the country. Some places were not as popular, Melbourne being one of them. Adelaide, we got moved down from the entertainment centre to the Gov, but in Brisbane we got QPAC, and that was, as you said, we jumped on the bus and that was the time to get on, and that was the time to do something live. Did Roy and HG ever sit on a table with a bottle of scotch and do anything in that capacity?
Well, the difficulty with we have in the past, but it's always connected with something else. So as we have done live radio shows. I'm not sure exactly how successful they have been, and we made live television. The problem with stand-up for us is that it doesn't... it doesn't hold our attention as a thing to do. So, and of course, you know, you make a television program, you think, oh, you might reach 100 people. You make a stand-up show, and you might reach 10.
Yeah.
So it's very time-consuming, and we're not interested in repeating things. So people who do stand-up tend to repeat the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
If we did that, we'd just change it all the time.
Yeah. You can't run off a script.
I don't think so.
No.
I mean, you can, but you know you can play Hamlet. But what we prefer to do is think, well, something else has happened. Let's talk about that.
You did work in the circus though at some point.
Yeah, well, the circus was one of those things whereby we early on there was a lot of work done in theatre and education. You know, that I don't know if you've ever encountered this idea that somehow that by taking plays and events out to schools, you can somehow improve the quality of reading and writing and arithmetic.
Oh, this is what they used to call edutainment.
Oh, okay, there you go. Okay, it's got other things, other names. Okay, so in this, we, as an offshoot of this, we developed a circus, I suppose a series of circus acts, and I was an understander, meaning I was at the bottom of the pyramid or the too high or whatever it was. Eventually I buggered my knees doing that,
Really?
so I had to hang up the jockstrap.
As it were. Thank you for joining us. Good luck with the next season. I hope we can get 3, 4, 5 more out of these ones, because it sounds like if you can make the Gold Coast sound like an interesting place that's had all these things happen, you
can do anything.
When are you going to stop?
Well, we'd like to go to Broome, and then I was thinking like Wollongong, you know, you can go much more regional things. And people say, well, Warrnambool, why stop? You know, you can go anywhere with it.
Yeah.
The one great thing about it, though, is that the stories are unbelievable. That people come and survive the most ridiculous hardship.
Yeah.
And, you know, just to find a place here. And, of course, they add immeasurably, not a popular view in some parts, immeasurably to the quality of life, and have changed completely how Australians live.
Well, we'll take you down to the French Quarter of Batuta.
Oh, yeah, very good.
We'll take you down there for...
the French Quarter just around the corner here.
For some oyster mornay. And we'll be in touch.
Chablis.
Thanks for joining us, Greg.
That's okay. Good luck.